Let's be friends.
Have you not?
Here we go.
Well, greetings, everyone, and welcome back to the Ambassador Wing and a brand new episode of the Ultra Retro Podcast. And today we've got with us Mr. Zach Leary and Mr. Ace Mowick, and today we are going to be discussing one of the greatest movies of all time, even if it's black and white, the Orson Welles classic CitizenKane. Zach, Ace, good to have you both along with me today. So, how y'all doing?
Great. Thank you, man.
I'm good, man. I appreciate the invite on this.
So, CitizenKane, well, regarded as the amongst many movie lists, the number one greatest movie ever made of all time. What do y'all think? Is it true? Is it a little bull or what?
I think it's a fact. I mean, in rewatching the movie, I mean, so I had fond memories of it, and I hadn't seen it for a few years. And checking it out again, I mean, it's so impressive. I thought it was tragic. I thought it was beautifully filmed. The acting is it's vintage, right? But in kind of a beautiful way. It was like a nice little window into old school America in a certain way. Badass. I mean, CitizenKane, I thought not only held up but kind of surpassed my expectations, even though I held it in high regard.
Same for me, because I had never seen CitizenKane. I had never really heard of it until when I was in my junior or senior year of high school, and we finally got our first VCR, and Blockbuster still existed, and I saw it sitting on a shelf one day. I think it was a VHS copy, and I was like, okay, I've heard everybody talking about this. I'm going to sit down and watch it. And I was absolutely blown away. I was like, this movie was made in the 1940s. Holy crap. I mean, this has so many film techniques, so many. I think Roger Ebert said it best. This movie has more special effects than the original Star Wars did, yet they're more invisible. They're subtle special effects. They're not in your face. They're not ships blowing up in space. They're photoshopping and early versions of animation and stock footage used to display the landscape of Citizen Kane's palatial pleasure palace, Xanadu, with its menagerie of animals and all of the different things that you could do there. You could go golfing, you could go boating, and so on. It's a visually stunning film, but it's also, I think, in a lot of ways, a timeless character study of one man's ego. And, well, granted, this name will mean very little to a contemporary audience like ourselves, but at the time when this movie was being made and was released, it was viewed as a lampooning, in a way, of one of the big newspapermen of the late 1800s and early 1900s, William Randolph Hearst, who personally led a campaign to see that this movie was utterly destroyed and never saw the light of day because it painted him in a very poor light. But at the same time, it also foreshadowed the rise and the unfortunate fall of the director and the star, Mr. Orson Welles. So, Ace, your thoughts on CitizenKane?
Well, my impression of CitizenKane is when I first saw it, I was fresh out of high school. This is my year when I was a jobless bum, just winging it through life and still winging it through life, but I have a job now. And And I had heard people say greatest film ever made, and I didn't get it at the time but go figure, we've had, it's almost been, what was it? Something 80 years since it's been released? Wasn't it early 40s? I can never remember the year.
It was released in 1941, so 41 to 81 would be 40 years. To 91 would be 50. To 2001 would be 60. To 2011 would be 70. 80 years, yeah, roughly.
Okay, so now it's like 80-ish years. And when I saw it, it was like 70 years. And I just think of how, like, a contemporary audience is not going to get it, because a lot of the innovations that the movie brought, like, have been copied by every director that's been influenced by the movie. So we've taken so advantage of it. It's just like, oh, what's this? It's like someone saying something akin to, like, I don't see the big deal of is about, like, say, brushing teeth, dental hygiene, because it was an innovation when it was created, but we just take so much advantage of it. We don't think about it. Like, I know it's a poor example. It's the first that came to mind, and the calling it greatest film ever made, that seems to be the consensus of both film critics, when critics were not just guys on YouTube talking movies like us, and the annoying people who just badmouth the movies that they don't understand. Plane gets stuck when I have to be juvenile. It's in my nature, and
it's okay.
And one actual critic who mentioned it passing in a King Kong review, James Rolfe of Cinemassacre fame, who's I will say is a filmmaker. So he actually went to film school and he actually made a movie. However people feel about the movie is beside the point. He did once mention how he felt it's overrated because film professors try and shove it down your throat. And because he was making comparison to King Kong, like how it did all this other stuff that CitizenKane gets credit for. And I think you might have a point, but the thing is that CitizenKane did it in what was more accessible to the audience, that was just a general drama film about a person and so forth, as opposed to an adventure piece. And it had to do all the groundbreaking cinematography and special effects in camera, as opposed through stop motion and post-production. Nothing against stop motion. I love Harryhausen films and so forth. So I think calling it greatest movie ever made is definitely a merited title, although I would not say it's what I would consider like in my top 5 personally. That's the other that is considered one of the greatest movies ever made around the same time frame is in my top 5, which is Casablanca.
Okay. I would say it's a benchmark film. I would agree with you. I don't. So merited that it's the greatest film of all time is an interesting statement. I think it's definitely a benchmark. Orson was not a Hollywood guy, which is interesting too. He brought a unique, at the time, sensibility where he would try weird shit out, and he had hired a state-of-the-art, Hall of Fame cameraman at the time to come in and help create his crazy visual style that we see, which is I don't know if he worked with this guy again. Which is an interesting question too. But on Kane, he had hired an amazing cinematographer, a guy who Orson said in interviews taught him how to direct in about 8 hours and showed him the basics. Here's how you do lights and all this stuff. But he was 25 years old when he made the film. It's pretty crazy. Some of the shots I think are pretty standard, but there are so many hero shots in the movie that are just fucking gorgeous. I mean, so many of them.
Yeah,
absolutely.
For me, all of that, the cinematography and the interesting camera design and the set design, they had lidded sets, which wasn't a rare thing. If you notice, it was one of the first few movies that actually showed the ceiling of a set, but they would have it like there was light coming through the ceiling of the set, but they would have it camouflaged to almost look like it was like a skylight for the damn building. That to me was impressive. Having the all the low shots, all the low angle shots where the characters in the frame looked bigger than they actually are. I mean, obviously these are people that just the same height as you and me, but Wells wanted to give them almost this epic or mythical stature because to him that's what these characters were. I mean, the character of Citizen Kane and Mr. Bernstein and Jebediah Leland, and of course his first wife. Oh, for heaven's sakes, I can't remember her name off the top of my head, but I can't remember the second wife's name, Susan Alexander Kane.
And Mary Kane.
Mary Kane, that was the first wife. Thank you, Zach. Oh, no, Mary Kane was his mother, wasn't it? Yeah.
Was it?
I
got the cast pulled up. I'll find it for you.
I can't remember if that's the mother's name or the first wife's name. I can't remember off the top of my head. But everything played into the telling of this story. Now, for those of you who might want to do some research on this and everything after we're done, after the review is over, there is a very good documentary that was done. It was called it was a PBS special and everything that aired like on a weekly or bi-weekly basis called The American Experience. And this particular special was actually put in with the 2-disc box set of the DVD version of Citizen Kane. And it's called The Battle Over Citizen Kane, and it discusses the battle between Orson Welles and the Mercury Theater and this very old school, very traditional newspaper man by the name of William Randolph Hearst, who actually was also a bit of an industrialist and so on. And Emily Kane. Okay. Was that the wife or the mother, Zach?
That's the wife, yeah.
Emily Kane, okay. And it was very much viewed as a lampooning, in a manner of speaking, of Kane or of Hearst, because he was still a big name. He was still had a whole lot of sway within the United States and in the public eye and so on. He had revolutionized or reinvented the newspaper business back in the late 1800s and early 1900s. He pushed very hard for America to get involved in the Spanish-American War down in Cuba and so on. The whole thing about Theodore Roosevelt and the Rough Riders and all that thing. Hearst was pissed because of what Wells was doing with this movie. He was mocking Hearst. He was belittling Hearst. He was shining a light on the hypocrisy and sometimes even the overly belligerent nature of Hearst. And Hearst and all of his allies in the news media of the day, they were not happy. Hearst could pull a lot of weight. But the interesting thing about this is that this movie has outlasted both Hearst and Wells. Granted, it is a testament to Wells's ability as an actor, as a director, and as a writer.
Yeah.
But those two names, for the most part, have faded, but the movie still stands.
And
Zach, go ahead. Or Ace, whichever one's let's go first.
No, go ahead, Ace.
Well, I was going to say that William Hearst was definitely the main person that he was lampooning, but he was actually lampooning a few different tycoons who were akin to Hearst, but Hearst was the main focus, obviously, because of the newspaper and so forth. And my source for that is Minty Comic Reviews, who I watched some clips of in preparation for this review. And also, if memory serves, like this was, like you mentioned, Orson as a writer, he actually did co-write the script for the movie, but yeah, it's mainly considered Orson's work. The co-writer tried to like get more credit, but when you look at all the facts, it is mostly Orson. I'm not saying the guy did not deserve credit, because believe me, I'm a firm defender of giving credit where it's due, but it's
Yes.
mainly Orson's work. And what was it I was going to say? And I was going to say something along how it's just incredible how this is, I believe, Orson's very first directional debut. It wasn't his first movie he tried to make. He was hesitant beforehand, and he tried actually adapting Heart of Darkness, but that fell through. He's like, okay, and he just did Citizen Kane instead.
Super intriguing.
Well, you know,
I mean, imagine him as Colonel Kurtz. That would be badass. I think Kane is a sociopath. I think he lacks empathy, and there's something deeply wrong with him. It's a tragic film. It's disturbing in certain ways, personally for him, and as a reflection. I mean, as an audience, we're looking at this guy who is really failing to connect with other people. It makes us kind of look at ourselves as a reflection of viewing this guy who has some redeeming qualities. I mean, he's a guy who, as a politician, public figure, sets out to tell the truth. Okay, he's a guy who sets out to empower the impoverished. And those are things I think almost everybody can get behind, where it's like, okay, I back that belief. But in his personal life, is a guy who, I mean, one of the most telling scenes for me in terms of what is wrong with him, and there's something deeply rotten within this guy, is him typing up the bad review on his own wife. Is really a shocking, weird, twisted, kind of sociopathic moment. So I'll just throw that out there. Have at that.
And now any schmuck can do that on Twitter.
Here's the thing. Is Charles Foster Kane sociopathic? Partial. I'm not saying he's full blown, but I'm not saying full blown, but yes, I will agree he does very much have sociopathic tendencies. The thing you have to remember is in the section where the investigative reporter, Mr. Ralston, goes to the Thatcher Library to read Old Man Thatcher's memoirs and everything, specifically the section on Charles Foster Kane, you see the flashback of young Kane with his mother and father. And his mother very much dotes on him. His father seems loving, but at the same time, he is kind of a hard ass. We also get the impression that he might be a bit of a drunk and so on. And the mother decides, without the father's consent or input, to sign away guardianship of their son to this bank representative who probably has no expertise whatsoever on how to rear children. He's first and foremost a bank man. He's a businessman. He's a bank tycoon, and so on. And you can tell that young Kane very much loves his mother. He even loves his father, but he's also afraid of him. And the scene where Charles pushes Mr. Thatcher with his sled, nosebud, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. And the father starts to go after him, but the mother shields him from him and she says, "You think he deserves a whipping?" He's like, "You're darn right." She's like, "That's why he's being sent away from you, where you can't get to him." And you see this very scornful look on young Kane's face. The issue is he was separated from his parents, primarily his mother, at a very formative age. Say age, I think he's like age 6 or 7, maybe 8 in that scene. And we see one other scene with him and Thatcher, who's somewhat younger, and then we flash forward to the new year, or the year when Charles turns 25, and he becomes fully independent from the bank and from Mr. Thatcher. We don't know exactly what his childhood was like, but we almost get the feeling that it was very cold, very unfeeling, very businesslike. So, how does a kid that young develop in that type of environment? One major with a loving mother and a well-meaning father, but also a bit brutish father as well.
The father gave up and just went along with it.
Yeah,
He
he
put up a
did.
defense. And well, they even physically demonstrate when the father, well, one of them goes and shuts the window. The father is
Mhm.
defending Charles, and one of them goes and shuts the window, locking him out of that conversation, sealing his fate, kind of. And the term rosebud is not a mystery. It drives me crazy. Everybody, oh my God,
No,
rosebud. What does it mean? It they
his
demonstrate
childhood,
yes, they demonstrate it throughout the film that Charles Foster Kane is seeking what?
his innocence. He even says it the night that he meets Susan Alexander and goes to her apartment. He said he was on the way to a warehouse to reclaim his lost childhood. So if he had never met Susan Alexander, he might have very well, I don't know if he would have turned out to be decent by any means, but the course of his life might have taken a different direction, and that might have been better for him. We don't know. And the thing that Charles is always trying to connect to, and this is what his best friend Jed Leland says to the reporter. Charles was trying to find people who would love him, who would accept him, would give him that personal connection that he never had as a kid.
That's what he
And
wants.
yeah,
Love. I mean, it's brought
mhm,
up at least
mhm,
5 times. At least 5 times. He
mhm,
doesn't know how to dish it out, but he wants it. He does know how to
mhm,
connect with people, but he wants love, and that is really sad. I mean, if you view the
yeah,
film through the eyes of the kid at the beginning of the film,
mhm,
it's a tragedy. I mean, it's a really it's a heartbreaking film.
yeah. And he says the word twice. Once at the very beginning, but just as he dies, and then after he goes on the rampage in Susan Alexander, his second wife's apartment there in Xanadu, and he picks up that snow globe that has the little cabin, and he says it then, Rosebud. So quietly you could, if you don't listen close enough, you miss it. It's his childhood. So,
And
Ace, your thoughts?
well, I was going to say, to quote a Seth MacFarlane cartoon character, it was his sled. It was his sled from when he was a kid. There, I saved you 2 whole long boobless hours. But but yeah, it is tragic when you,
That was good.
because that's something I'm sure that is not many people would think about in their younger years, but definitely when you get older, you reach that point in life, you kind of look back on everything you've done, and you just kind of have this nostalgic, want to go back to the simple days when you remember being happy, your kid years. And some people say, oh, well, you haven't got that, reached that point yet. You're not in your, even in your 50s yet. Well, you don't have to be. Like, even in your, like, say 40s or 30s, you can still have that attitude with, like, when you have all this pressure of society, or things just happen in your life upon you. So imagine Kane, like, at that point, having done all this stuff and losing all these people, just imagine he kind of wants to have that aspect back in his life, where he just looks back with so much regret.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Well, I
definitely
mean,
about
and obviously
regret.
this movie, the yeah.
It is about
Well, and the
regret.
thing
I mean,
too is,
that's a primary factor in this film.
well, and there's even
Absolutely.
a scene and everything. Obviously, no, it's okay. This movie takes place obviously during the start of the Great Depression, and there's a scene between Mr. Bernstein, Kane, and Mr. Thatcher where they're talking about the selling of the newspapers and so on, and Kane's allowance and so on, and Kane says to both Bernstein and Thatcher, he's like, "Well, I always did choke on that silver spoon." He's like, if I had been very rich, I might have been he's like, I might have been a pretty good guy. And Thatcher says, what will you have been, Charles, if you hadn't been rich? And he looked at him, and he's got this very cross-eyed stare. He's leaning back in his chair, and he says, everything you hate.
Yeah, both fucked up statements, both of them. And that's, I think that's why the studios hated it. I mean, this film is dark for that time period. I mean, look at what the film says and look at what the film is about. I mean, the film opens with a death. So, I mean, it's Orson Welles, I think, may be obsessed with death. If you look at his other famous character, Harry Lime, a character who is being they're investigating his death. But that's bold. I mean, you said 1940 something, to open the film with the main character's death and to open it with a newsreel, basically, which is very odd. I mean, it was odd. The beginning is strange. It kind of throws you off balance for a while.
Yeah, it does.
For like 10 minutes. For like 10 minutes, you're watching like a newsreel.
I mean, then they even say it and when the whole thing's wrapped up, and they're like, well, so many years of a man's life. I mean, from the time he was a young kid till he's like in his 60s, maybe 70s, give or take. I mean, one other comment. The aging makeup for this movie, for Kane, or well, for Orson Welles as Charles Foster Kane, for the time, extremely well done. I mean, very, very well done.
Yeah.
There was one comment that the actor Joseph Cotton, who played Jebediah Leland, made. He's like, Kane got the best, Wells got the best makeup. I got the lousiest. Because if you see his old age makeup for when Mr. Ralston goes to see Jedidiah Leland after he visits Mr. Bernstein, the makeup does lack a little bit, but it's still not that bad. But let me ask
they
you.
Just told him. They just told him. They said, "Hey, sit in this wheelchair. It'll get the job done."
Yeah,
I can think that can be partly forgiven because apparently the makeup artist for the movie was actually like this was his first movie that he had worked on. So supposedly, I don't know how factual this is. Orson saw his work, liked it, and hired him on. And obviously, he did a great job with Orson, and not so much with the other character who's I already forgot the name.
Joseph Cotton, Jedidiah Leland.
Yes, and my only comparison I can give of makeup effects at the time are from the silent era with Lon Chaney Sr., obviously, which was much more like creature based, and another peer later on when we got sound, Jack Pierce in the Universal movies, and from another RKO production, Hunchback of Notre Dame with Charles Lawton as Quasimodo.
Yeah, I've seen footage of that. The makeup for that was very well done.
Well, they gave the singer kind of
Susan Alexander.
Yeah, they gave her subtle makeup where her eyes are kind of sagging when we meet her, and she's got the white hair wig. I think it works. I mean, it's an old movie, but it still works. It's like in that way, like some of the. Okay, so if you want to criticize some of the makeup, it still feels, even in that respect, like you're watching a play, which to me is totally fine. Like you're watching a play. I mean, it's a Shakespearean epic play, and I dig it. You know.
Well, if you think, here's the thing you have to remember about Orson Welles. He got his start in one of the work projects during the Great Depression, and he would do these lavish productions on, I think it was either on or off Broadway, one or the other. And he would do Macbeth and I think Hamlet, Julius Caesar, and so on. And he would work with, there would be a few trained actors for these productions, but the majority of them were people of color who had barely acted in anything ever. And people would
Yeah.
come out of those shows and be like, damn, these were good.
I think Orson called that his greatest achievement. I've seen every Orson interview. I mean, as much as I'm a fan of Citizen Kane, and I am,
Mm-hmm.
gorgeous. I mean, just a gorgeous escapist. I mean, I was watching it yesterday. I mean, I was just sucked into it. I had a great time.
Mm-hmm.
I'm more a fan of Orson than any of his movies. I mean, he's such a fascinating guy to listen to. And I've seen basically every interview with this guy. Love Orson. Love this guy. And he said this is that play was his crowning achievement.
And he would know. That would be his personal perspective, his personal opinion. So, who are we to naysay otherwise?
It would be pretty cool if Time Machine go back and check out that play.
I won't lie, yeah, that would be cool.
And
let me ask you. Go ahead, Ace.
Oh, I was going to say, and correct me if I'm wrong. I know for a fact that he had done a radio broadcast of an adaptation of War of the Worlds. Isn't that available to listen to for free, whether it be on YouTube or on Spotify?
It sure is. It's on YouTube. I know for a fact it's free. There's a channel that's actually dedicated to. Let me ask you guys. Let me ask you guys one question in regards to the movie. Of the characters whose perspectives we visit, whether it's in person or through the memoir of Thatcher. I'm not asking who had the most accurate by any means, but whose did you prefer the most? Was it Thatcher? Was it Susan Alexander Kane, his second wife? Was it Jedediah Leland?
Good question.
Very good question.
I would say the singer for sure. I mean, when you get to the end of that whole thing, well, it displays his inability to connect with people, which is something, his lack of empathy, I have empathy for. You know what I mean? I mean, you see this guy struggling with her, and I mean, even their interactions are just tragic. I mean, you see them in this great palace. You always wanted a palace, and all this stuff. She's sitting there doing puzzles, just to take her mind off of. Yeah, well, what is that? That's avoiding something, right? Which is a nothing activity. I mean, nobody wants to do a fucking puzzle. Right? Nobody wants to do a puzzle. Okay, I'll throw that out there. Their relationship is so strained. It's so strained. I mean, he comes up to her and says, I want to go on a picnic. And, she totally questions that. And he goes, he basically says, I'm not asking you. I'm not asking you. I want to go on a picnic. And they go, and their relationship is horrific. It's brutal. It's hard to watch. But at the end of it, you
can't take your eyes off of it.
No, you can't. But at the end, she shows empathy for him. When the detective says, I can't help but feel bad for him. She says, so do I. So do I.
Mm-hmm.
It's brutal, man. I mean, it's brutal. I mean, the film is definitely a tragedy, no doubt about it.
Well, and I think that's the intention of the movie itself. Ace, what about you? The singer, Mr. Bernstein, Jedediah Leland, or from the Thatcher memoir? Which section
singer
did you prefer? Go ahead.
I'd say the singer. Basically, the same thoughts as Zach, because you kind of, when you see her from her perspective, like, because who else would really know him, like, but behind the scenes and so forth, other than her, she would see the real him. And when she sees the real him, it's just kind of like, really? That sort of thing. That is best I can word it. And you
I think for
kind of
me-
want him to be better, but at the same time, he's just like, you can't change this person.
You can't.
No, you can't.
He's so damaged. Yeah, that dude is beyond reproach.
Yeah.
Beyond repair,
And,
I guess.
Yeah, beyond repair. Yeah. I think for me, it's not that I don't, and not that I didn't enjoy the segment with his second wife, but for me, it's a bit of a toss up between Mr. Bernstein and the best friend, Jedediah Leland,
Not his best friend.
because
Kane doesn't know any friends. That's the point.
well, as Leland says to Mr. Ralston, the reporter, friends, I might have been his only friend. Maybe I would have been what you guys nowadays call a stooge. I don't know. But he's like,
Yeah,
I was the closest thing to a friend he ever had, if he ever had one. So
he didn't.
I'm going by the words of the man himself.
Well, Kane didn't.
Mr.
I don't think. I mean, look at the way he treated that guy.
Well, again, he doesn't know how to have any type of friendship or close interpersonal relationship because, unfortunately, he was robbed of that because of the actions of his mother. I mean, I'm not saying that the mother is solely to blame, but in a way, the parents, both actively and passively, are to blame for Kane's emotional development, his social development, practically his entire childhood being turned upside down. Being raised by a banker who is, as best as I can see, is very well meaning, but he doesn't have the tools as a parent or any type of parental guardian or anything else to rear a child.
Have you ever met a banker with a soul?
Have you ever even met a banker with a personality?
Granted,
Yeah, banker.
But,
Raised by a banker. Oh no.
So yeah. Well, it's like I mentioned before when Kane makes that comment to Thatcher. I would have been everything you hate if I had never been really rich. Which means he might have even gone harder after all the tractions and the trusts and everything else, and he might have been even a better politician, perhaps. So, I think the biggest takeaway
that
for me,
statement, though. Sorry to interrupt. That statement
No, go ahead.
shows this guy's intent. That shows he's already corrupt at that point in time. And again, he has virtuous aspects to his character, but he's already corrupt. There's something deeply rotten. And that's a fucked up statement. The film also shows you that somebody who's fucked up can't change. That's a downer.
It is. Because unfortunately for Kane, without the foundations of a solid or at least a semi-stable childhood, he was doomed to turn out to be any type of degree of normal as it is.
And like you said earlier, how it was kind of because of his mother. She thinks she's sending him off to a better thing, like, oh, this can give him a better life than I ever could living here in this low circumstance. She thinks she's helping him out, giving him what he needs in terms of like, oh, financial stability, maybe a better environment, but not what he needs emotionally. Like he might be better off in terms of security, but not that emotional security. And she doesn't know the negative consequences that would have in the long term. Kind of similar to a certain character that is to the right shoulder of Ambassador on the Wall.
Anakin Skywalker, yeah.
Yeah, which I obviously like. I was trying to be subtle, but like we can see like how this movie as a whole like influenced so many filmmakers, and like Steven
Mhm.
Spielberg apparently has one of the original Rosebud props. God knows in what condition it is, and obviously has had an influence on George Lucas when crafting the prequels. Which another video, like I think I sent you the link, Ambassador, was partially influenced by his divorce. But I'm getting off topic. I just wanted to mention
Temple of Doom.
that. Not Temple of Doom, something else. But yeah.
I can't remember what movie it might have been, but yes.
Unless I misunderstood what you said, Zach. Sorry, I didn't mean that. I wasn't trying to say like, "Oh, your opinion's wrong." That I think I might just
No. There's no necessarily right or wrong here. There's one perspective. There's a different perspective. So this is all amiable here. This is all.
Well, that
This is
divorce was pretty brutal. It may have affected 15 films. Who knows?
Oh wait, okay. Now I get what you're saying. Like how he was going through such a negative time, he wrote Temple of Doom. I wasn't referring in that context. I was referring within context of like basically the events of like his life. Like he kind of mirrors it in the prequels.
Beautiful
Like,
guy. Love George. He just did, guys. A total segue. I'm so sorry.
no,
He just did his first interview in like 5 years, and it's on Twitter. I mean, I love hearing from this guy. Love George.
we all love George.
I'll have to look in that. If I could like meet George Lucas one time, or even like have a conversation with him, whether it be through a letter or through an email or a phone, and it was actually him, I wouldn't like if it was in person. I wouldn't want an autograph. I wouldn't even ask for a picture. I just want to say, George, thank you so much.
That reminds me, like, there's a video of him out there trying to get where he's walking out of a hotel or something, and people are like, George, can you sign this? He's like, get a fucking job.
I love it. He's called it as he sees it.
Yes, he did. All right. Well, any closing thoughts on Citizen Kane, gentlemen?
I saw the film through the eyes of the kid. Okay. Upon rewatching it, and I don't know what my first experience watching it was. I've probably seen it 3 or 4 times. It's been a long time. This time watching it yesterday, I viewed it through the eyes of him as a kid and looking for love. I saw the character flaws within this guy. I saw a tortured individual. I saw gorgeous cinematography, which again, Orson credits this guy who taught him basically how to direct in 8 hours. It's a landmark. I mean, it's a benchmark, regarded as the best film of all time, as Ace has described. I think that's a worthy point of view. I don't know if there is a greatest film of all time. I don't know if that exists. And that's not Ace's point of view, that he's quoting other people. But Citizen Kane is a gorgeous film. It's total escapism. It's a piece of Americana. And what a fucking great experience watching it.
Yes. Ace, what about you? Final thoughts? Closing thoughts?
Well, not to repeat any of Zach's points, so I will say if anyone, if they've have not seen Citizen Kane, give it a watch. If you have seen it and you just didn't get it, all I can say is stop consuming the typical Hollywood drivel. Use your brain. Think a little when watching the movie a second time. You will find things you will like about it.
As for myself, it is a movie that has stood the passage of time. It has seen 2 world wars, numerous other larger and smaller wars. It has seen a depression. It has outlasted the men that was inspired by it, the men who made it, the women who were part of it, everything. It is, I will regard the greatest movie of all time. For me, I will go with my esteemed colleague, Mr. Leary, and I will say that it is very much, I think, one of the best benchmark movies ever done. So, hope you all enjoyed the review. We'll see you on the next one. Until next time, stay ambassadorial.